Okay, last night I spoke about the presidents, and that's my old life. I spent 37 years doing that. 3 years ago I had an experience that happened in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'd say before 2012, if you talked to me about consciousness, I probably couldn't have spelled the word, and I couldn't have cared less. I had no idea. I had what I call an instantaneous download. Happened in Phoenix, as I said, and my life completely switched. I have been dragged into a lot of stuff. I really didn't do anything by plan. When I had my first UFO sighting, the only reason I went out and saw this UFO was because this small town in Manitoba was having these UFO sightings almost every day, and I kept insisting to my friend, well, let's go see what they're doing. We went out and I saw the UFO and I sort of fell off the edge of the earth and got obsessed with it and went and did the investigations. And then I spent all these years trying to figure out what I had seen. I went to the Canadian government, went to Dr. Eric Walker, the former president of Penn State University, went to the president of the United States, and then I have this download experience. And it's like, whew, I used to say, you know, in big conferences like UFO Congress and places like that, I'd be very upset about the women's with the crystals in the selling room and stuff like that, and the consciousness stuff, and saying, you know, these people are making us look bad. Why do they allow these people in here? And then suddenly it's like, boom, I'm one of them. And I remember Jerry Pippin, the first interview I did on it, my good friend Jerry Pippin said, I can't believe you've done it. You used to be the nuts and bolts guy, you're the document guy, and now you've gone over to the woo-woo side. And I said, well, Jerry, let me tell you, it didn't happen by choice. I got teleported there. So this is basically going to tell the story of consciousness, and it's going to have a lot to do with neurology. So you're going to have to sort of follow this. And at the end, if we have time, this is a very long lecture, at the end, if we have time, I'm going to play a little game of Jeopardy on downloads. And this is very interesting. You think that most of the stuff that happens in the world, people figure out. Once you see these download stuff, you're going to realize that a lot of the stuff that's out there came from somewhere else. So let's begin. And as I said, I call it the neurology of ufology. So I'm going to talk a lot about neurology, about how the brain works. And in the modern world, in neurology and science, they'll basically say the brain is just a physical organism. It produces consciousness, and you have a brain, and that's all it is. And it's just consciousness is an emergent phenomena, or consciousness is an illusion. And if anybody says to you, you have one brain and it's just very simple and has consciousness, turn around and run as fast as you can. Because I'm going to show you have a number of brains, a number of different consciousnesses, and the more you look at it, it's like everything else in the universe, the more complex it gets. The main pattern that I have, that I've sort of learned from this, is got to do with chance and pattern. And I say if you understand the UFO situation, you're going to understand that it is the most important subject of all times. I mean, this is it. This is reality. And the basis that I always look at when you look at anything in science or in ufology is you have to look at the thing is it chance or is it pattern? The modern world, if you send your kids to school or your grandkids or whatever, they will be taught that the world is a random process, that it's survival of the fittest. It's a meaningless, random world. And what you see when you look at ufology and you look at some of these other consciousness things, it is anything but that. It is a meaningful world, and it is all basically patterns. One of the things that I'm going to talk about, and you're going to see it until you're sick, I put on top of almost every slide right brain, left brain. I'm going to talk about right brain, left brain. The left brain is the ego, it's the conscious mind. The right brain is the unconscious mind. It's the side of the brain that believes in oneness, that everything's connected, no time and space. And one of the things that had come up, Edgar Mitchell has a support group, the Apollo 14 astronaut has a support group for experiencers. And these had 1,200 experiencers have filled out a survey. And one of the things that they've actually brought up, and this comes to this random chance thing, is it's been found that of the experiencers that filled out the survey, I can't remember what the number is, it's 45% have had an out-of-body experience. And I think it's like 25 or 30% of experiencers have had a near-death experience. So they actually set up a committee to study why do all these experiencers have near-death experiences? And I said, well, I mean, it's very simple. I mean, if you believe in a random world, you're going to say these are two random phenomena. How could two very bizarre random phenomena happen to the same person? But if they're not random, if these people actually chose to have these phenomena, and you can look at if you can predict the future, if I can see that somebody's going to have a car accident tomorrow and you have a near-death experience during that car accident, well then that near-death experience was not a chance. It was a pattern that you may have chosen to have that experience, that we can see into the future, that time and space is not what we think it is. So they put up this thing, and I said, well, what's the big deal? I mean, you have people who have near-death experiences and you have people who have experiencers. And if they're both chosen events, if they chose to have them, then there's no big deal. But they have this big thing and they're trying to figure out, because they've fallen back into this idea that it's a physical world and that it's random. So how can two random events happen at the same time? This is Stephen Hawking's. This is sort of the predominant view in science. In the National Academy of Sciences, there's only 4% of scientists who will admit to any sort of paranormal phenomena. Only 7% of the top 2,000 scientists at the National Academy of Sciences will admit to any sort of concept of God. So this is basically a concept that science has, and I say science is actually behind the cover-up. A lot of people will say the media is, or the government is. I say it's science, because the government will take their cue from science, and so will the media. And you've seen this lately, that now science is saying, yeah, there's probably extraterrestrial life out there. They wouldn't have said that 40 years ago. They would have said, we're the center of the universe, we're the only life in the universe. And even, I think it was Dawkins who said, not only are we the only life in the universe, if it hadn't been for an asteroid hitting the Earth and wiping out the dinosaurs, even we wouldn't be here. So it was that predominant view that we are, that, like the left brain, we are this ego, we're the center of everything, and it's random, and everything is running by chance. And Stephen Hawking had said, man is just a chemical scum on the surface of a typical planet. That's in orbit around a typical star in the outskirts of a typical galaxy. So it's basically that you're just an accident, it's a meaningless world, and you're just a biological robot. Materialism. This is something that Ingo Swann, the famous remote viewer, brought up. I didn't realize this until he brought this up. And he goes through the definition of materialism. And this is basically what runs science today, is this idea of materialism, that everything, that you have a physical world and you're looking for the smallest particle, so you're smashing things to find out what's the smallest particle to make up the universe. And materialism, this is the sort of definition. Materialism is a form of philosophical monism, which holds that matter is the fundamental substance in nature, and that all phenomena, including mental phenomena and consciousness, are the result of material interactions. And Ingo Swann pointed this out. I didn't realize this did not come up until 1845. That's when materialism was first introduced, and it was introduced along with two other philosophies. One was a materialistic philosophy of economics, and the other was a political theory of materialism, and they were all done by Karl Marx. And Karl Marx brought up the political materialism and the economic materialism and the scientific materialism. Now, the communist idea of economics and politics has dropped by the wayside, but the materialist thing is still hanging on. So this is before 1845. You really won't see anybody talking about materialism, that everything is physical, that there is nothing outside the physical world. What I say science is doing, and why they're the roadblock, is they are basically, I say, doing nothing more than telling Bible stories. They have a bunch of theories that they will put up, and they will say something like, almost like the Moses story. Moses goes out, he's got a staff at 6 feet high, he goes to the edge of the water, he hits the Red Sea, the sea parts, the children of Israel run through, and then the Egyptians are chasing them, and they get to the other side, and as the Egyptians are going through, he hits the rod, and the water closes, and the Egyptians are all wiped out. And I say, nice story, but how do you do the trick? And science does exactly the same thing. If you take a look, you will see that science will use words like spontaneous remission. Or they'll say it's with savants, who I talk about an awful lot, these kids who you can't button their shirt, but they can multiply two six-digit numbers in their head instantaneously. And so they'll say, well, that's just genetic memory. And the big one of them all is the singularity thing. And singularity is how the universe started. It just came from a singularity. And you say, well, what is a singularity? And they say, well, that's just something that doesn't obey the laws of physics. And I say, well, that's convenient. I mean, you can just make up stuff that doesn't obey the laws and just say, well, that's how it explains. And coincidence and illusion. So you'll hear them using these various words to explain various phenomena that they can't explain. And to me, that's nothing different than explaining the parting of the Red Sea. The question is, how do you do it? How is the trick done? You put a name to it. And the prime example that I use is the idea of a cell, a single cell dividing. And they will just say, well, it's just like an automatic system. It just does that. And you say, well, what do you mean it just does that? A cell contains 100 trillion atoms. So when you have a fertilized cell that starts to divide, makes a second cell, what will happen is it will take 100 trillion atoms from somewhere, wherever it gets. It has to source the atoms, it has to find the atoms, it has to take the atoms, put them in the right place at the right time, and then put life into it, and it will do this in 15 to 24 hours. And they say, well, it's just an automatic system. Well, fine, explain how it works. How does it do this? We have no idea what is going on. But they'll just say, well, that's an automatic system, and just put a name on it and then say, we don't have to explain that. And I've actually had people argue, and they say, we have to explain that. I said, yes, you do. You have to explain that. You can't just put names on stuff and let it go. One of the things that you'll see is this chicken-egg thing. What came first, the chicken or the egg? And they'll make the joke, oh, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Serious question. What came first, the chicken or the egg? These are type of things that really aren't explained. You just sort of assume things, and science is still saying that they're going to put the period on the end of the question. And the thing is, because they've developed so much technology, that science is highly regarded in the world because of the technology that's been developed, that people will listen to science. So if a scientist says there are no UFOs, everybody will say, well, he's a smart guy, he's a scientist, he must know what he's talking about. Same as DNA. The double helix, which was invented by Crick when he was on LSD. And he came up with the idea, and the question is, with DNA, what came first, the cell or the DNA? The DNA can't exist without the cell can't exist without the DNA. Although I will show you an experiment in a second that will show you how DNA is very important and how where DNA actually may have came from. And DNA is very important in the UFO field because you can look at in life, you can look at say the chimpanzee, 98.7% DNA the same as us, but we can't breed with them, but aliens can breed with us, which would tend to indicate the DNA is basically the same. And that's from on the other side of the galaxy. So the question is, where does DNA come from? And they'll just say, well, it just sort of, it's a chicken-egg thing. We really don't have to explain that. And I say you do. What I say is going on in the universe is its patterns. This is the Rupert Sheldrake type stuff. And you'll see things like, a simple thing like you break a magnet. You break a magnet in half. You don't get a broken magnet, you get two magnets. It follows a pattern. It will form two magnets, both with north and south poles. If you break it in half again, you'll have four magnets. It won't be a broken magnet. It seems to be following a pattern. Another one that you can use for this example is the idea of a flatworm. You can cut a flatworm into 10 segments, and you don't get 10 broken, like a broken flatworm. What you will do is you will get 10 brand new flatworms. They will grow 10 new flatworms, as if they're following a pattern. There's a pattern there in that structure that is following, and it can actually develop another one. This is a marine sponge.
Gives us some insight. First, a sponge is cut into small pieces. Then it's pushed through a sieve at the end of a syringe. This breaks the animal down into its individual cells. This may seem a brutal thing to do to a living organism, but to a sponge, this is of no consequence. In response, it does something quite astonishing. The cells begin to move, and then they form clumps. Soon the clumps form bigger clumps, until 3 weeks later, a miniature sponge has formed.
So what I say is basically we have to set the rules. And the rules are no smoking within 25 feet of the building, and nobody's allowed to use Spider-Man. Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. You can't use superheroes. And that's basically what science is doing, is science is using superheroes. The appropriate response is what Thomas Edison said. We don't understand 1/1,000,000th of 1% about anything. Everything's a mystery. And we basically are pretending we know what's going on. And most of the stuff that's going on, we really don't know what's going on. And it's like the idea that science is using is they have like superheroes. They'll talk about the spontaneous remission man, the placebo man, instinct man, genetic memory man, and they'll just throw these sort of superheroes to explain things that in ufology we're actually looking at. That we see aliens doing these kind of things, and they say, you can't do that, that's just, and they'll give you a superhero name to explain why this type of paranormal phenomena aren't happening. And what I will do today is I'll put all the paranormal phenomena together, and I'll just show you a pattern that shows that it's all the same stuff. It's basically a pattern that if you understand the pattern, you will get the thing going. Thomas Edison was the guy that basically spelled this out when we move out of the material world. He said, the day when science begins to explore beyond physical phenomena, more will be discovered in a decade than over centuries of science's existence. This is the DNA experiment. I'm going to show you a number of things. Quantum physics is big now in the UFO world because quantum physics has come to sort of defend a lot of the strange beliefs that we have. They're sort of backing up the fact that we aren't crazy people, that some of the stuff we're talking about may actually be true. Luc Montagnier actually ran an experiment. He was the guy that discovered the AIDS virus. In 1983, he won the Nobel Prize in 2008. And I can almost guarantee you, if he had announced this before he got his Nobel Prize, he never would have got the Nobel Prize. They would have taken the wheels off his little red wagon, and he never would have got it. He does an experiment. You got to remember, this is a Nobel Prize guy. I'm going to play a little tape, and then I'm going to explain what the significance of this is. And it's very significant to UFOs because DNA is a big part of the abduction experience.
The controversy is the following. Dr. Luc Montagnier's experiments demonstrated that not only does bacteria emit extremely low-frequency electromagnetic radiation, but that radiation can organize base nucleotides, the so-called building blocks of DNA, contained in a completely separate vessel, into organized DNA strains. And even more provocative, filtered water from which the bacteria had been removed also retain the ability to organize these nucleotides. Now, this does not refute Pasteur's principle that life comes only from life. However, the question raised is, what is life such that particles do not compose life?
Okay, so what the discovery basically says is that there's a resonant emission of low-frequency electromagnetic waves by high-water dilutions of DNA. They discovered that DNA is giving off this electromagnetic signal. So what he does is he runs this experiment, and on the bottom you'll see what he does is he takes DNA in a solution and he filters the DNA. And then he puts water in, he filters the DNA. So puts water, he does this about 5 times. Gets all the DNA out of the water. Then he takes the water, the residue, and he puts it, and he checks it, and it still has the resonant frequency. Even though the DNA is gone, it still has this frequency of this DNA. Then what he does, they take it on the top part there, they put it into this electromagnetic signal, this generator, and they put in, which is very important here, they put in 7 hertz signal. And 7 hertz is very important. I'll be talking about it a lot today. 7 hertz is the Schumann resonance, and it has to do with a lot of paranormal phenomena. So they take this Schumann resonance, and what they do is they take the filtered water with no DNA in it that has the signal. They take pure water in another test tube, and what they do is they put it in this for 18 hours in this 7 hertz signal, and then they take the pure water, and they find that the pure water has the resonant frequency. Even though it has never had DNA in it, it has this same resonant frequency as the filtered water. Then they take the water that has the signal and has never had DNA in the test tube, and they'll put all the components of DNA except for a DNA structure, which you need to duplicate it. They put it in, and out of 104 base pairs, 102 DNA base pairs form in that test tube, and it never had DNA in it. So the DNA is forming, according to him, like a pattern. It is following something is orchestrating this, and the only thing that's unique is the signal. So the signal is the one that's creating the DNA. Even though you have all the components, you don't have the DNA. That comes from the signal. And when he put this out, they just went crazy. I mean, they were just, I mean, this guy is under attack. And that's because this will refute a lot of the stuff that is being put out by science. And he's under very heavy attack, and he calls it, what does he refer to their thinking as? Highly viscous thinking. And we call them sort of, you know, idiot skeptics, but he calls them with people high viscous thinking, and he's under very heavy attack. That's one of the things in science that sort of defends us and sort of changes the worldview. That if this gets adopted, if he's able to conclusively prove this, this will change the whole structure of how people think life started. The other one that science has a big trouble with is this idea of the dual split experiment, where you send these photons through the two splits and you get this wave pattern, which indicates that it seems to be like there's a wave, like something's interfering with the other side, almost like you would send water through. You're going to get the waves interfering with themselves and forming this wave pattern. So what they actually did in this dual split experiment, they sent one photon at a time through the slits. And then they wanted to determine it was still forming the wave pattern, even though they were just shooting one photon at a time. And they then decided that they would put an observer. They would start to monitor the slits to see which slit did the photon go through. And the minute they put the observer on, they started to measure it, suddenly it turned into particles. They take the observer off, and it goes back to waves. And this brought up and this is like 100 years ago, they did this experiment. It's been done thousands of times. Science will admit that this actually takes place. That when you put an observer on, when consciousness is involved, the wave turns into a particle. And so the idea is that consciousness is primary and material is secondary. But what they'll say is, we don't talk about the philosophical implications. We'll talk about the experiment, but we won't say what it actually means. And it's the old thing, shut up and calculate. Produce the material, produce the technology, but don't talk about the implications. The other one that they don't really want to talk about, hang on, we're missing a slide here. The other one is entanglement, which I'll get to in a second, I guess. It's not the slide right here. This is how I got onto this whole thing. This happens 2012. I'll briefly describe my experience. I'm chasing documents, I'm chasing the president, I'm chasing the head scientist for the CIA. I'm trying to figure out what's behind this thing, who knows the secret, that the government may have the secret, they should tell us what the secret is. I go into a lecture by Colin Anders in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm not really paying attention. I really don't want to be in the lecture. The only reason I go is because he's a high-level researcher, and I haven't seen him speak for a number of years. I go in the lecture, I'm not really paying attention, I'm just sort of sitting there, and basically what happens is I'm sort of in a meditative state, and I'm just sort of watching, and all of a sudden it's instantaneous. And I call it a download, and people say it's not the right word. I say, you still know what I'm talking about. Maybe it's not the right word, but this is what happens. It's just instantaneous. And Edgar Mitchell had the same sort of download experience. He's coming back on Apollo 14. He comes to the Earth, and suddenly he said, this thing popped into his head. Everything's connected. Everything is alive. And he was more sure about the conclusion to what had come into his head than any equation he had ever solved. Same thing happened to me. I knew absolutely that this was the answer. You don't have to question this, you don't have to test this. This is the answer. And what happened is Colin Anders is talking about crop circles, and he's talking about consciousness and crop circles, and how 80% are hoax, 20% are real. The aliens are doing the 20% are real, and they're also doing the 80% are hoax. They're telling the hoaxers what to put down. So and that's the theory, and I'm really not listening. And all of a sudden this pops into my head, and three things pop into my head. One was, and these are things that I gathered with my left brain. You'll hear me talk about left brain, right brain. My left brain, my rational analytical brain, had gathered all this stuff over 37 years. I'd never put it together. Some of the stuff I didn't even know what the people were talking about. And suddenly it all made sense. Like all this stuff came into my head and said, boom, 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 here's these three things, and here's how they line up. The first one was a top secret government that Stanton Friedman actually helped get out in Canada. It's a top secret document written in November of 1950 by the Canadian government, Department of Transport, that Paul Hellyer used to run that department. And they were going to the Americans. Wilbur Smith was interested in flying saucers. He was interested in mystery. They go to the Americans and they say to the Americans, what's the deal with flying saucers? Is this real? What's going on? And they go through classified channels, which is very important. They're not talking to people on the street. They're talking through classified channels. And the material comes back. Wilbur Smith puts it in the top secret memo, and the top secret memo says, we were told by American officials that flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. Small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush is running the program. They're trying to figure out what's going on, and it's of tremendous significance to the Americans. So for 35 years, I ran around. I'm talking about this document, this fantastic document. Flying saucers are real. The Canadian government knew this, all this sort of stuff. And I knew what the next line was, but I never really saw it as significant. The next line of the document suddenly pops into my head. The next line of this document, and this is a top secret Canadian government document from American officials, material brought through classified channels by American officials, says, and we were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. And the Americans aren't doing very well because they've said to us, if the Canadians are working on the subject, we're willing to exchange credentials and talk to the Canadians. They're trying to figure out what's going on. This is significant. And I didn't realize this until I got this download. This is significant because in 1950, there is nobody talking to aliens. The first contactees, Adamski and Williamson, would not appear until a couple days after they detonated the hydrogen bomb. Suddenly they appeared. After we detonated the hydrogen bomb, suddenly they say, oh, we're talking to aliens. They say, stop the nuclear tests. So nobody was talking. Betty and Barney Hill would not be till the mid-1960s, till the book came out. In 1950, between 1947 and 1952, there was nobody. People were seeing flying saucers, stuff flying around, but nobody was saying, I'm talking to an alien. So how did the Americans know that mental phenomena was involved with the flying saucers? I now say it's because we now sort of contend, or we sort of have accepted, that at Roswell there was a live alien. So when you pick up a craft in Roswell, you're picking up the craft and you're picking up the alien, and the alien is talking in their heads, and they're going, oh, wow, it's like wow, it's like, and so they knew, and that's how, through classified channels, the Canadians were told. They weren't told they had a live alien, but they were told that mental phenomena. That's the only way the Americans could know that mental phenomena was involved, because we know that aliens are telepathic. We didn't know that in 1950. So this pops into my head. The second thing that pops into my head was when we went to the Canadians, the material that came through that top secret memo had come through a guy by the name of Dr. Robert Sarbacher, and Stanton Friedman was actually interviewing Sarbacher, and he said to Sarbacher, what happened? Sarbacher said, I was at a series of briefings at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and a bunch of top scientists and engineers were brought in there, and Stanton was saying, well, who was there? And he said, Bush, von Braun, von Neumann. He's naming all these guys, and Stanton says, well, is there anybody that still might be alive? And because you're naming a bunch of dead guys. And this is 1983. And then Sarbacher said, well, there was this guy from Pennsylvania. He was real arrogant. He thought he knew everything and stuff like this. And it turns out we do the research, and we determined that this is probably Dr. Eric Walker. He's former president of Penn State University. He's got 14 honorary doctorate degrees. He was the guy that co-invented the homing torpedo. He had all sorts of inventions. He was very famous. He worked for Eisenhower. He was good friends with Milton Eisenhower, the president's brother. So we go to him and we basically say, you're at this set of these briefings, Wright-Patterson. He said, I was there, so what? Go study something else. You're wasting your time. You're up against the windmills. You're never going to get anything unless you got the mind of Einstein. I don't talk about this. I'm not going to talk about this. And for 8 years, people bugged him. And one guy in Great Britain, and this is the second thing that came to my head, one guy in Great Britain is talking to him about what Stanton's going to talk about tomorrow, MJ-12. And he says to him, he says, Dr. Walker, he said, are there still just 12 people on MJ-12? And are they all still Americans, or is this an international group? And Walker says, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And the guy goes, well, he just didn't have an answer. And so Walker said, look, let me tell you this. Unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in. And you're talking about the control group, the group that runs the whole thing. Unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken in. Very few people understand it. And this is a 1992 interview. I had no idea what he was talking about because he talked in rhymes and riddle. He couldn't talk. It was classified. He couldn't talk about it. So he was talking in rhymes and riddle. And suddenly it came, oh, that's what he's talking about. It's the same thing the Canadians were talking about, the fact that mental phenomena is involved. And the third thing that popped into my head was a lecture that was given by Ben Rich at UCLA to the engineering alumni. And there's 3 researchers in the room. One is Jan Hartson, the now international director from MUFON. Jan Hartson, when he was 9 years old, had a close encounter with a UFO in his backyard. He and his brother. They were 30 feet away from this thing, and his whole life was obsessed with UFOs. He became an electrical engineer because he wanted to determine how flying saucers flew. He wanted to build a flying saucer. He was just fascinated. And so when Ben Rich gets up, the last slide he shows is this famous slide that he'd done a number of times where he says, and we know technology did ET home. Everybody in the audience laughs except for Jan Hartson, and the other 2 UFO researchers are going, well, do you hear what he said? Do you hear what he said? A bunch of people asked questions at the end of the lecture. Ben Rich is answering. He said, we've discovered the mistake in the equation. It's not going to take a lifetime to do, but it's going to take an act of God to get this thing out of Congress because it's so deep black. And you got to remember, Ben Rich ran all Lockheed Skunk Works, SR-71, U-2 spy plane, stealth fighter, all the drones that are flying around now, that's all Lockheed Skunk Works. So he ran the show. This is top guy from Black Budget. And he makes this statement. So he's leaving the room, and Jan Hartson figures, I've had this my whole life, I've got to find this out. He goes racing after Ben Rich. He's leaving the building, and Jan Hartson says to him, Ben, he said, I've been obsessed with this my whole life. I have to know, how do they get here? I'm interested in propulsion. How does the propulsion system work? How do they get here? And Ben Rich turns around. This is 1993, 2 years after Dr. Eric Walker. He said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And Jan goes, I didn't expect a question. And he goes, it means everything in time and space is connected. And Ben said, that's how it works. Gets in his car and drives away. So this is what popped in my head. I go, that's it. It's this ESP thing. It's this consciousness. It's, you know, and I just became excited, and it was like I was sure this was for real. And that's what got me down this second rat hole, where I just went down this consciousness rat hole and started to go. So here's the model that I sort of interpret. In 1799, before we discovered radio waves, you know, and X-rays and gamma rays and all this kind of stuff, we basically believed that what you saw in the physical spectrum was what there was. There was nothing else outside the physical spectrum. And if someone said, well, there's radio waves and there's this sort of stuff, you'd say, give your head a shake. I mean, there's nothing. You can't measure it, you can't weigh it, you can't do whatever. This is all there is. And so that was the model that we had. So if we take a look at consciousness, we would basically assume the same thing, that you have consciousness, you have the physical consciousness, and then you have all sorts of people who are reporting remote viewing, and they're reporting psychics and telepathy and all this sort of stuff, and you'd say, well, it's like 1799. There's got to be something outside the physical spectrum or outside the consciousness spectrum that will explain this. We just haven't measured it. We just haven't discovered it yet. And they'll say, no, that's not the way it works. It's just consciousness. There is nothing else. William James, well, we'll skip that. This is where they say, no, there's nothing. It's just consciousness, and it's like a light bulb. When you have a light bulb, the light bulb produces the consciousness, and then when the light bulb goes out, the consciousness goes away, and that's it. It just disappears. So what the model that I have developed, and I think that most people in the paranormal world sort of understand this model, is that you have consciousness. And with the dual slit experiment, it shows that consciousness is primary, that when you put an observer on, it turns to a particle. So consciousness is primary, so all you have is a field of consciousness. Everything is consciousness. And that the conscious mind is just this little tiny thing that is on top. So you have a consciousness, our consciousness on top of this universal consciousness. And have we got Huxley here? So you have, and it splits down into left brain, right brain. The consciousness that we have in the world, and you need the consciousness, you need the consciousness, is your left brain. It's conscious mind. It's able to do 40 bits. It's able to do 4 items. In your conscious mind, you can do 4 items, unrelated items. Once you get to 5 or 6, the mind starts becoming confused. It can't remember the things. Your unconscious mind, on the other half, can do 40 million bits. It can do piles of things all at the same time. It runs your blood pressure, it runs your heart, it runs all this sort of stuff. It's doing all this stuff, and you really have to think about it. So it's much more powerful. And one's working as a serial, one's working as a parallel processor. And so this is the basic model that you have to sort of adopt. This idea that you have a field of consciousness, which would be the unconscious mind is connected into this field of consciousness, and you have the conscious mind, and you have almost like the Atman, the small mind, is equal to Brahman. The small mind is equal to the big mind. That you put them all together, and it equals the big mind. Michael Gazzaniga, this is important. I'm going to do some neurology, some talk about neurology. And one of the main guys that I quote is Michael Gazzaniga. In 1981, the split brain research, which is very important to this whole thing, won the Nobel Prize. Michael Gazzaniga is the guy that took over for Roger Sperry, who won the Nobel Prize. He took over the department, and he started to do some experiments with split brain people. And I'm going to explain the split brain experiments, and they're very important to understand what's going on, because when I'm doing the right brain, left brain, you may think, well, it's a reality. And what happened was, in the 1940s, they realized that people with epilepsy, between your 2 brains, you have 2 brains, 2 minds, and they actually will fight with each other when you cut them. And what happened is they realized with epileptic patients that when you cut the corpus callosum, which is 300 million axonal fibers between the 2 brains that send the signals back and forth between the 2 minds, When you cut that, you can stop the epilepsy. You can stop the signal from going back and forth. But once they did that, they realized that there was two minds, there was two brains, and these things would actually fight. That the two hands would be fighting to open a car door. The one would light up a cigarette, and the other hand would take it and throw it out, and then they'd light up a cigarette, and the other one, and they would have these fights. The two minds were actually had different personalities, and they suddenly realized, and this is important, that the left brain is your rational, analytical side. The scientific brain can talk. The right brain cannot talk. So in order to deal with the right brain, when Gazzaniga developed these systems, in order to talk to the right brain, you have to get the left hand to act. Because your right brain runs the left side of your body, the left brain writes the right side of your body. So when they're asking questions of the right brain, they say, with your left hand, take out of the bag what you saw. Point to what you saw. The right brain cannot talk. So these are important things you have to sort of remember. So Gazzaniga actually takes over the department, and he starts doing these experiments. And he says the two minds, and this is critical. Science will say there's just one mind. It's just a phenomena produced by the brain. It's nothing really serious. It's an illusion. You have no free will, all this kind of stuff. And he said the two minds are aggregators of still other mental systems, dozens, if not thousands of them. So what you have in your two minds on both sides of your two brains is you have all these like visual systems and audio systems and balance systems and all these things. And they're like separate consciousnesses. And they're doing all this kind of stuff. And then you get the Spider-Man thing. Who puts it all together? Who makes the image? Who puts it all together that makes you believe that it's just one mind? All these different things are being put together automatically without you thinking about it. And when you start to look at the brain, it is way more complex than anybody ever thought. It's got all these different systems. And this is the top guy. This is the top guy in split brain research who said there are thousands of systems on each side of the brain that are working independently, and something is putting them all together to make you see a unified vision. This is the present view, the idea that the mind is just like light coming off a light bulb. And it comes down to this thing where the guy says, you know, I think you should be more specific here in step 2. And it's like you have this mathematical equation, and then a miracle happens, and then you have a mathematical equation. And it's this Spider-Man thing where you just sort of stick in a superhero to sort of explain, well, the mind puts it together. And it's like, well, explain that. And they say, we don't have to explain it. Yes, you do. You have to explain how this is happening. And I'm going to give a model that starts to explain this. Already in the 1950s, we knew, we have the model that is still accepted by a majority of people, that the brain is all there is, and that everything that happens is inside the brain. Almost like if you have a TV, you have these things going on inside the TV, and there is actually a football game going on in the TV. And when the TV goes black, then the football game goes away. Well, no, we know that with TVs and radios and stuff. It's not happening inside the TV. But in modern neurology, they still believe that everything is happening inside the brain. But Pribram, and this is important, Pribram in the 1950s actually did the experiment that showed that the memory is not in the brain. And what he did is he took all these rats, and he taught them to go through a maze, and then he would take each rat and he would cut out a different part of the brain from each of the rats. And he basically cut out every part of the brain of the rat. And each rat was still able to run the maze. And so he determined memory is not in the brain. If it had been in the brain, we would have been able to stop the rat at one point from running the maze. So he was confused. He said, memory's not in the brain, it's not there. What happens in 1964 is they discovered the hologram. And the hologram was downloaded by a guy sitting on a park bench. Sitting on a park bench, and all of a sudden, the idea of the hologram pops into his head. And so when Pribram saw the hologram, he realized that the brain, he knew the memory was not in the brain, and he knew that Fourier transform mathematics was being used by the systems of the body to produce a sine wave in the brain, that the brain could take all these touch, feeling, smell, all this sort of stuff, and put it all together. It was doing this very complex mathematics. And in 1964, when they discovered the hologram, they discovered that the hologram was also using Fourier transform mathematics. This very complex mathematics that we could only really do once we got computers. And when he saw that, Pribram suddenly realized that's how the brain works. It's working like a hologram. That there isn't there's no center of memory in the brain. That the brain is keeping memories like a hologram. that if you cut out this part of the brain, like the rat, you cut out this part of the brain, the memory is still all there because it's across the thing, it's not in any one spot. And so the hologram is a very important invention that sort of backed up what ufology was saying, is that you have this non-local effect, that it's not in any one part. So we have the hologram, and there's actually been developed systems now. Hologram is using 2 different images. They're crossing these images, and the interference of the wave patterns is what causes the 3D image. So you have that, but it's also now been proposed that your 2 sides of your brains are doing the same thing, that they're creating this sort of interference pattern, and that's why you're seeing 3 things in 3 dimensions. That's how you can store memories holographically and all this kind of stuff. So the brain is working like a hologram, and the hologram is very important. If you take a hologram and you split the hologram, and you split it, cut it in half, if you take like a plastic hologram, and you look at it, you still have the image. And this is very important about the hologram, is that you can keep doing this. You can cut it, and it's still the image is there. You've got 4 images instead of 2, and then 8 images, and then it just keeps going. And the more you cut the hologram, every time you cut the hologram, it becomes fuzzier, but the image is still there. And so what I say is that if you have like one of the superheroes, the scientific superheroes, if you take the big one, like Singularity Man, and you were to, instead of just cutting the hologram in pieces, if you were to take the hologram, and if it was in a glass module, and they were to take the hologram and smash the hologram on the ground hard enough to break the hologram into its individual molecules, would the images still be on each molecule? And I say, yeah. When does it stop? When do you keep cutting the hologram when suddenly it doesn't produce the image? So if you break it down to its essential components, and this is one of the main things, is that you have like a cell. How does a cell reproduce a body? A cell will produce a body that has 100 trillion cells, and it will have all the memory for how to put the cells, where the cells are to go, what kind of cells are to be put in there, a system for replacing 500,000 cells that die in your body every day. It has all this stuff, and it's all contained in this one little cell that starts the whole thing. All that memory is there. And it's almost like the hologram, that all the memory is contained inside that cell. And that's one of the ideas that you'll see in ufology, is that everything in the universe is contained in every particle. This Atman equals Brahman, the small mind is equal to the big mind. That every atom has the knowledge of the universe to reproduce the universe. And so this is why the hologram thing is so important. Now here's the split brain research I'm going to go through, and then we're going to start going through the model, the model of all the paranormal phenomena and how this fits into this. Again, you have to remember the right brain runs the left side of the body and vice versa. And here's the 2 models. Now this was not developed by me, this is developed by neurology. You have on the left side, you have a brain that believes in separateness, it believes in ego. We are separate, we're separate particles, and that's where you have evil, that's where you have war. We're separate, and I'm always the good guy. I'm always going to be the good guy. And you're in my way, you're a bad guy, I got to cut your branch off the tree, or I got to drop a bomb on you, get rid of you. And that's this idea of self. The other side, the right brain, believes in egoless. It believes in oneness, it believes everything's connected, it's subjective. Your left brain is your rational, analytical. And one of the interesting things was one of the neurologists, Ramachandran, did an experiment. He had one of these split brain people who had the corpus callosum, and he would ask the one brain, he would ask the left brain, is there a God? And the guy would say no, because he's talking to the brain, and that's the talking brain, the left brain, and the guy would say no, there's no God. And then he would say quickly to the right brain, is there a God? Point with your left hand, and the left brain would say yes. So in the same person, you had this brain where the left brain is the scientific, analytical, more believing in randomness, and the right brain believing in oneness and God and this sort of stuff. That they actually showed this in experiments with split brain people, that there is actually a separation within each individual. Okay, now I usually talk about this woman, and I always say you got to watch her TED Talk. This is the second most popular TED Talk of all times, and she gets a standing ovation, which you almost never see at a TED Talk. This is a woman who will help you understand right brain, left brain. This woman is an expert witness, and she's giving testimony. She's not a neurologist who's doing an experiment and then interpreting what this person says. This is a woman who was a top recruiter for the Harvard Brain Bank. She's a neuroanatomist. She works with brains her whole life. when she's 37 years old, she has a left brain hemorrhage. And what happens is her left brain is being flooded with blood and it starts to shut down. And she's going to describe better than I can this whole idea. I'm going to play 3 minutes of her TED Talk. And she's going to talk about what's happening is her left brain is going offline, and then she's in her right brain. Then her left brain comes back online, and then she's going back and forth between the two sides of the brain. And she explains, and you got to remember, this is expert witness testimony. This woman knows brains, and she's telling about what happened to her, not what she interprets from somebody else. So here's her 3 minutes of her explaining left brain and right brain.
And I'm standing in my bathroom. I heard a little voice saying, okay, you muscles, you got to contract, and you muscles, you relax. And then I lost my balance, and I'm propped up against the wall. And I looked down at my arm, and I realized that I can no longer define the boundaries of my body. I can't define where I begin and where I end, because the atoms and the molecules of my arm blended with the atoms and molecules of the wall. And all I could detect was this energy. And I'm asking myself, what is wrong with me? What is going on? And in that moment, my brain chatter, my left hemisphere brain chatter, went totally silent. Just like someone took a remote control and pushed the mute button. Total silence. And at first I was shocked to find myself inside of a silent mind. But then I was immediately captivated by the magnificence of the energy around me. And because I could no longer identify the boundaries of my body, I felt enormous and expansive. I felt at one with all the energy that was, and it was beautiful there. And then all of a sudden, my left hemisphere comes back online, and it says to me, hey, we got a problem, we got to get some help. And I'm going, oh, I got a problem. So it's like, okay, I got a problem. But then I immediately drifted right back out into the consciousness, and I affectionately refer to this space as La La Land. But it was beautiful there. Imagine what it would be like to be totally disconnected from your brain chatter that connects you to the external world. So here I am in this space, and my job and any stress related to my job, it was gone. And I felt lighter in my body. And imagine all of the relationships in the external world and any stressors related to any of those, they were gone. And I felt this sense of peacefulness. And imagine what it would feel like to lose 37 years of emotional baggage. Oh, I felt euphoria. It was beautiful there. And then again, my left hemisphere comes online and it says, hey, you've got to pay attention. We've got to get help. And I'm thinking, I got to get help. I got to focus. So I get out of the shower and I'm mechanically dressed and I'm walking around my apartment and I'm thinking, I got to get to work. Can I drive? And in that moment, my right arm went totally paralyzed by my side. Then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke. And then the next thing my brain says to me is, wow, this is so cool. How many brain scientists have the opportunity to study their own brain from the inside out? And then it crosses my mind, but I'm a very busy woman. I don't have time for a stroke. It's like, okay, I can't stop the stroke from happening, so I'll do this for a week or two, and then I'll get back to my routine.
So she's talking about this left brain, which is the rational analytical side of the brain that you need to exist in the world. If you don't have your left brain, your conscious mind, what happened to her when it shut down for 5 weeks, she sat there and she was in nirvana and she just sat there and drooled and her mother took care of her. So that's what happens if you don't have it. And then, so you have this oneness, she's talking about this oneness, how you move out into this oneness, and you need this rational analytical mind. So that, she sort of describes it. She's an expert witness. So this is what she's talking about. The left brain is separateness. It's ego. It believes me. I'm in the center of the universe. And the other side is this oneness and this interconnectedness where she can't tell where her body ends and space begins. The other one I'm going to talk about later, which is very important to this field, is Dr. Diana Powell, who worked with John Mack. She was also at Harvard, and she does the telepathy stuff with the autistic students. I'm going to show you this later on. It's very, very important stuff because aliens are telepathic. And she has this model for telepathy with nonverbal autistic stuff, and I'm going to show you a video which just blow you away. It's just amazing with this totally telepathic child. Again, I say you're going to see this right brain, left brain on top of all the slides. It's that important. And it basically says that one side is ego, it's separateness, and the other side believes in oneness of your two brains. And this is what Jill Bolte Taylor had said. I believe that the experience of nirvana exists in the consciousness of our right hemisphere. My stroke of insight would be peace is only a thought away. And all we have to do is silence the voice of our dominant left mind. And this is what I'm going to talk about, is silencing the left mind. This is what it all comes down to, shutting off the conscious mind. This is how all paranormal phenomena sort of work. Here's the experiments that they did to determine the right brain, left brain thing. Once they had cut the corpus callosum of these people, what they would tell them is you watch the screen. Just look at the screen, watch the dot in the middle of the screen. And then what they would do is they would project an image. So on the right side, they would quickly project this image of a car and it would be gone. And they would say to the person, what do you see? It's coming in the right eye, so it's going to the left brain. The left brain can talk, so the person will say, I saw a car. They say, okay, fine, good. Then they go and they show it to the other side. So they say, what did you see? And the guy says, because now you're still talking to the left brain, he says, I didn't see anything. Because it came in the left eye and went to the right brain. And the right brain can't talk. So the right brain knows what it saw, but it can't say anything. And all you're doing is talking to the left brain, and the left brain says, well, I didn't see anything. The heck? Oh, we've got a guy there. Get rid of it. So this is the idea, is they were able to communicate with both sides of the brain. So what they would do is they would show two images at the same time. And they would say to the person, what did you see? So of course the person is going to say, I saw a hammer. He didn't see the apple. Then what they would do, and this is important, this is what Gazzaniga developed this system. He would start asking questions. So he would say to the person to the left, to the right brain, he would say, take your left hand and take out of the bag what you saw. So the left hand will reach into the bag and it'll pull an apple out. And then they say to the guy, why did you pull an apple out of the bag? And you're talking now to the left brain. The left brain didn't see anything because the right brain saw it and it can't talk. And then what happens is the left brain makes up a story. And this is when they developed this theory of the storyteller and the interpreter, or the pathological liar. I call it the pathological liar. And what it is, it's in the left hemisphere, and what it is something that when something becomes inconsistent, when the hand picks out an apple, and the left brain, the rational analytical brain, doesn't know why his hand picked out the apple, he'll just make up some BS. And it did it, Gazzaniga said, every single time it would do this. It would instantly make up a story. And what it was is that I think we've got the slide here. Yeah, it's like the Berlin Wall. That basically this storyteller, this interpreter, which is very important, is something that is guarding the story. So as you grow older, you develop these stories and you lay down these tracks of how the world works. This. And eventually you've got it this thick. And that's why aliens abduct young children. Because when it's this thick, the aliens can come in with rubber boots and a big shovel, and they can't get deep enough to get a thought into you because you've developed all this stuff. So all these tracks are put down. And then what happens is, suddenly something happens that's out of the ordinary. The guy picks up the apple, and they say to the left brain, why did you pick up the apple? The guy has no idea. And the storyteller makes up a story. And this is what happens in ufology. You have UFO sightings, and so somebody says, okay, you have a UFO sighting, and if the person has built this world, of material world where everything's physical, there are no UFOs. There is no, Michigan sightings where they said it was swamp gas or UFO crash at Roswell. And what the left brain storyteller will do is make up a story. So when you say, okay, last night I was in bed and I was levitated up and I went through the wall, the left brain storyteller, suddenly there's a hole in the wall. The story is no longer consistent, and the left brain storyteller, the rational analytical thing, has to make up a story to put the story back together again. So because it believes in a physical world, that everything's physical and none of this, it'll make up a story. So it says, oh, there was alien bodies at Roswell, and it'll say, oh, that was crash test dummies in 1953. And then I haven't got time to do the experiments, but they actually did experiments to show that once the story is laid down, once the storyteller makes a story, you can't change the story. It will defend that story. It will defend the mogul balloon, the swamp gas, all that kind of stuff. And that's where skepticism comes from. It comes from a left brain that believes in this physical world, that everything's physical and nothing's out of the ordinary, and suddenly you come along and blow a big hole in the wall, and it has to fill the hole. And that left-brain storyteller fills that hole. So the story becomes consistent. So you need that. But Zeneca said it happened every single time, and almost every single time it was wrong. It was just making up stuff. And this exists, so you have actually three consciousnesses. You have the right brain consciousness, left brain consciousness, and then in the left brain you have this independent consciousness that is making up stories. Now when it comes to this is my model that I sort of developed. When I started looking at all this stuff, I suddenly determined that everything is right brain. When you start looking at UFO abductees, remote viewing, hypnosis, psychic phenomena, meditation, psychedelic drugs, religious experience, autistic savants, aliens, channeling, energy healing, which I really started to get into this energy healing thing, it's all right brain. You look at it and it's all right brain. It's all basically the same thing. It's shutting down the left brain. You shut down the left brain, that's how you do meditation. That's how you do remote viewing. So I'm going to go through some of these different models, and I'm going to show you how this fits in, how these things explain it. Aldous Huxley was the guy that defined the theory that I sort of adopt. Aldous Huxley said in his Doors of Perception in 1954, each person is at each moment capable of remembering all that has happened to him and perceiving everything that is happening everywhere in the universe. The function of the brain and the nervous system is to protect us from being overwhelmed and confused by this mass of largely useless and irrelevant knowledge. By shutting out most of it, we would otherwise perceive or remember at any moment, leaving only the amount that you need to exist. So what you have the consciousness field, and you have our conscious mind, and what it is a filter. It's a filter, it's a reducer that takes all the consciousness that you don't need. You don't need to know about all the stuff that's happening in the universe. All you need to know is how to get up in the morning, how to brush your teeth, how to go to work. That's all you need, and it cuts this thing down. And so when you come to paranormal phenomena, basically what you get is you get a situation where that filter is ripped. You're able to rip the filter, shut the reducer, open the reducer. It's almost like a computer and the internet. It's almost an analogy, almost like we were given, and you see my download stuff, you'll see the computer may have been given to us. That you have a computer, you have an internet, and if you can rip the filter, you get the password. And if it's like me, I had the password for like 1 second in Phoenix. I got the password, I was on there, it downloaded this thing, and some people, like savants, some savants are on 24 hours. I mean, their left brain is completely shut down, and I mean, they're able to like download stuff. And Rain Man, if you've seen the movie Rain Man, 12,000 books. He could tell you the books backwards and forwards, every line in every book, backwards and forwards. They have this unbelievable ability to download stuff out of this conscious field. Dreamcatchers, the book Dreamcatchers used the word SSDD, which is basically what it comes down to. Same shit, different day. It's all the same stuff. It's basically, it's the same process. Shut this left side down, and you end up with a paranormal phenomenon. So here's the list, and I actually did a manuscript on all these things, and it was very common. And it basically, again, comes down to this thing. Jan Hartson says to Ben Rich, he says, Ben, how does it work? Ben says, what do you know about ESP? Hartson says, everything in time and space is connected. That's how it works. Oneness, right side, it's all connected. If you understand it's all one, that's how it works. Aliens. This comes down to this 1950 thing. They knew aliens were telepathic. Telepathic stuff is absolutely right brain. There's nothing conscious about telepathy. If you understand telepathy, you can, if you're telepathic, purely telepathic like aliens are, you understand oneness. Because telepathy is basically this thing where everything is connected, everything is one on a hologram, and all you're doing is moving so if I'm not gonna read your mind, I'm just gonna go into your mind in the hologram, which is in my mind, and I'm just gonna go to your mind and pull the information out. So you're just working inside this hologram. Everything's connected. So when aliens are purely telepathic, it just simply means aliens understand stuff we don't understand. It looks like it's magic, but they just understand stuff. They understand how the world, how consciousness actually works. We still think we just got this consciousness. We just got one brain, and it's just a consciousness. It's a random world. It's a physical world. We're just totally deceived as to how the world works. They know how the world works. This is the other one I talked about. Science has a number of things that they have a problem describing, and this is the one with the entangled particle. If you take two particles in space, and most people in ufology now know this. This is getting across because it defends our theories that if you have two particles in space, if you take two photons and they can be on either sides of the galaxy, they can be wherever they want. And Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. And it was like, shut up and calculate. Don't try to explain what's going on here. You take the one and you change the spin of the one photon. The other one, no matter where it is in time and space, will instantly change its spin to balance. And therefore, this one knows what you did to this one. This one is aware of what you did to its buddy. Awareness is consciousness. And the scientists will say, well, that's not what it means. And I say, yeah, that is what it means. It's aware. It's aware. It's conscious of what you did to its buddy. So consciousness goes to at least the particle level. That when you do something to one particle, the other one will know what you're doing. And it's aware. We may not realize everything's connected, but if you're a higher elevated consciousness, you're going to realize that this happened. And then the question is, will UFOs show up? Before 1945, there was some UFOs, like a few. But in 1945, I mean, it was like the LA freeway. I mean, they just all appeared. I mean, it's like there's piles of aliens and they're all over the place. And I believe it was because we detonated the atomic bomb and the rest of the world picked it up. And when it comes to particle entanglement, this is what Ben Rich said. He was asked, how did they get here? And he said, what do you know about ESP? Everything's connected. If everything's connected, if everything's entangled, can you move a spaceship from here to here across the universe instantaneously like you do with entangled particles? If you understand entangled particles, how it works, can you actually move across? And so that's Ben Rich said, that's how they get here. They're moving through time and space. They understand everything's connected, and that's how they do it. We went through that. This is where it gets to the download stuff, which I'll do right at the end, depending how much time we have left at the end, is the download stuff. Edgar Mitchell has a support group for experiencers. There's 1,200 experiencers filled out a survey. And they wanted me on the board of directors. I said, no, I don't really join groups because groups are very left-brained. It's sort of like eventually it comes down to who's stupid, who's right, who's wrong, and I'm going to run the thing, and it's like these egos are all fighting and stuff like that. And I said, I'll help you. I'll do whatever you want. I'll associate with your people. And I just don't want to join any groups. And then they said, they ran the thing, and this is question number 54, and that's when I said, I'll get involved. I'd like to interview these people, as many as I can. And the question number 54 is this question. Listen carefully. Do you believe that you possess information about advanced technology, advanced physics, and other scientific information that you've never read or learned in your normal environment? They asked 1,200 experiencers this question. Of the people who answered the question, 43% of them said, yeah, I got that. They're getting downloads. They're getting scientific material, advanced technologies, medical technologies. I've had these people contacting me, and it's like, I had one at Contact in the Desert. She just got the phone. And I never got her because there was piles of people around. I never got her information. She showed me the phone. She says, look at this, I got this, 25-page download. And it's scientific. And some scientist analyzed this thing and said it wasn't crazy. And she said, I'm a secretary. And I go, you did that? And I'm looking, I'm trying to remember the address where it was so I could get it. There's a number of these people who have these 25-page unified field theory things. There's a doctor in New York City and stuff like that. This is happening all the time. And so what I say is when it comes to understanding the UFO thing, I talked about the presidents last night. The president may know. The president may not know what's going on. Who cares? He's never going to tell you. You go to an experiencer and you say, what's going on? They'll say, oh, I was taken here, I was going there, and I've got this stuff coming into my head. And the question is, why are the aliens, whoever's doing this, why are they doing this? Why are they giving these people stuff? Why are they teaching people to levitate stuff? Why are they allowing people to fly the flying saucer? These kind of things, once you start talking experiencers, you realize this stuff's going on. And I think it's extremely important that 43% of people are getting these downloads, and we should talk to them. We should find out what the heck's going on. This is where the answer is. The answer is not with the government, because they're not going to tell you. It's not with science, because they don't care. It's with experiencers, and these, I call them the chosen. These are the people who are the chosen. They are the people who are playing in the Super Bowl. This is, if you understand the story, this is a Super Bowl of all stories, and these are the people in the Super Bowl. These are the ones that were picked to play in the game. These are the ones that are on the field and are being told what's going on, and we should pay very close attention to these people. The United States of America is 320 million people. The most conservative figure that has been done was the 1992 Roper poll, which said 2% of Americans are experiencers. That's 6.4 million people. are experiences in the United States alone. If 43% of them are getting downloads, that's 2.7 million people walking around America with mathematical and scientific material appearing in their heads that they didn't learn in school. It's coming from somewhere else. I think that's important to be analyzing these people and figuring out what the heck's going on. One of the ones I always refer when I talk about some of the more dramatic downloads, this is Suzanne Chancellor, who runs a website called Random Alien Brain Droppings. She actually there's an interview with her and the other guy. I put these two people together. Both of them had the same experience. She's 9 years old, she's on a ship, and she's interacting with a tall gray alien, and at one point they're talking about cancer. He says cancer is something you have. It's something, the cure to cancer is something you use every day. And she says, at that moment, this giant 3D holographic image of a formula appears out of the wall. It just appears. And she said it's so three-dimensional and so big that she said you could actually, you could walk around this thing. And this thing appeared out of nowhere. So she tells this story. And then you have this guy by the name of Brett Oldham. He was in Las Vegas. I think he's in Kentucky now. He wrote a book called Children of the Greys. He's no friend of the Greys. He tells a story about being forced to watch as the Greys take his child from his girlfriend. He's forced to watch them do it. And the same thing, if I could have, I broke their neck. He hated the Greys. And at one point, he's in the ship, and he says to the tall Grey, he says to him, "Let me ask you a question. What's your concept of God?" And the alien said, "We are one with the one who is all." And Brett went, wow. He was just floored by what the guy said. We are one with the one who is all, the oneness concept, which is the main alien message. We are one with the one who is all. And he said when that happened, he was just floored. And he said at that moment, suddenly this image, 3D holographic image, started to appear, a mathematical formula. Same as Suzanne Chancellor, same story, started to appear out of the wall. And he's looking at this thing, and the alien says, "You have a disease on your planet called cancer." And Brett says, "Yes, we do." And he said, "This is the cure." And Brett says, "Really?" And then he thought, "Oh, all that trauma they put me through, it's all been worth it." And he said, "Oh, can I get something to write it down?" And the alien says, "No, you have to remember it." And he said, "Oh, I can't remember it. I'm not good in math. I can't remember it. You got to give me something to write it down." And he said, "No, you got to remember it." "No, give me something to write it down." And he said it got so confrontational, they actually allowed him out of the room. He was fighting with them. He wanted to write it down, and they said no, and they actually escorted him out of the room. So you get these kind of things that when you start talking to experiencers, you get these things where people are basically telling the same story. And I saw them, on this interview, they describe the alien, and they're talking the same alien. He's got the cloak on, he's a tall gray, all this sort of stuff, and it's very, very dramatic that these people are walking around with this kind of material. This is Grant Morrison. He is considered the second top guy for comic books in the world. All the new X-Men movies that are out, that's his stuff. New Batman, that's his stuff. The Invisibles, that's his stuff. And basically, he is also getting downloads. And I guess if I got the video here? Yeah, here it is. Okay, here's the video of him describing 1994, Kathmandu, his alien abduction experience, and the download that he gets. And he asks the alien, "Why are you doing this?"
What they told me was they took me out of my body. I wasn't in my body anymore. This doesn't normally happen with hash. This happens on DMT, or it happens on ketamine or something, right? I'm on hash, a tiny little bit, size of a lentil, and I start tripping, and I'm out of my body. And these fuckers are there, and they said, "Where do you want to go?" The first thing I said was Alpha Centauri, which is the first thing you would say, of course. And they took me to Alpha Centauri, and it's fucking real. It's there. There's 3 suns. The whole thing was moving exactly as we're told it's supposed to move astronomically. And I'm there, and I said to them, "Oh, what the hell's going on here?" As you might. And they said, "We've come to tell you this stuff so that you can put it in your work and explain it to the world." Right? Why do they always say that to everyone? Why do they always tell everyone to go out and tell the world what's going on, and everyone tells us the same shit?
So you got to remember, this guy's the second top guy for comic books in the world. A lot of kids read comic books, so they have influenced this, and you'll see this a number of times. High-level people who are very influential are getting these things and being told, "Put it in your work. We want to download the stuff," almost like subliminal advertising. This is a woman just contacted me from Canada, from Victoria, and she's directly interacting with aliens, and she's got 3 spirit guides, and one of the spirit guides says, you got to contact Grant Cameron, he's at the right place in the right time, and this letter comes out of nowhere, I've been told to contact you, and she's got a bandage, she's got a number of medical stuff. This one's actually got a patent, she's got a working patent. I have been given medical information for the purpose of curing the human population of all disease. Bold statement, I know, but if you knew what I knew, this is what you would be saying as well. Currently, I am in the process of patenting a living biomedical bandage made of human components that will flip the medical world upside down, according to some of the world specialists who have reviewed it. The bandage repairs skin rapidly, leaving no scars. And it can be put on a wound in a battlefield. You don't have to clean the wound. So she's claiming this download, and I have talked to her on the phone, and I've heard this thing, and I've seen, I know what the patent, I know who reviewed the patent, and the scientists and stuff like that. And it does seem to have some legitimacy. Like, she seriously believes that this is being given to her, and she has some other medical inventions. I have 2 other medical inventions, so I'll just quickly mention, and you can't mention these people's names because it's the scientific thing. It's like the idea that if you mention it, your career's over. I have a guy, he's a medical guy. He told me his UFO experiences. His daughter, I know his daughter, she's a trained medical person, and he got a download to handle viruses. A system that would capture the virus, and then the virus would die inside the system. And he said clearly, absolutely clear, came from the aliens, no ifs, ands, or buts about this. And there was actually an article printed, it's being tested in the United States at a university, and there was an article written at a newspaper about his research, and he put it on Facebook, and I said to him, someday we'll be able to tell the whole story. And he said, yeah, someday we'll be able to tell the whole story. I have a NASA engineer who had an invention that was actually put on the space shuttle, and he reportedly got this. He said to me, he said, Grant, the last thing I remember when I got this idea in the morning, when it popped into my head, the last thing I remember that night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. He sold the company for $100 million. I know what the invention is. It's a very dramatic invention. Again, you can't release it because it's over for this guy. I mean, if I release this. So I get these things all the time. There's piles of this stuff. It's actually very common. And these people are sort of being ignored. Here's a study of, again, this left brain. You shut down the left brain. This is something that was discovered in Brazil, dealing with people who are experiencers. They had a study of 100 people, trance mediums in Brazil, and they found that 10 of them were experiencers. And they were able to actually produce a state of high gamma, which meditators like monks and stuff like that will take their entire life, and they can go into this samadhi experience. And these 10 experiencers were able to do it like that. And these monks spent their whole life, and they couldn't do it every single time, but the experiencers could do it every single time. So the question is, how are they able to do this meditation thing instantaneously when they've never practiced, never done it, that monks in the East have done their whole life and aren't as good as they are? So this is something that was discovered, and it was almost like these people are being trained to do this, to move into this other side world. This is the other thing that I'm going to talk a little bit about what's called the Bankston method. It's energy healing. It's the Cadillac of energy healings. And in there, this system is taught to a guy by the name of William Bankston, who's a sociologist. And he learns it from a guy by the name of Bennett Merrick, who's a psychic, almost like this woman in Victoria who has this near-death experience, having a child, and suddenly she has all this, she's talking to the aliens, and she's getting all this download stuff. And this Bennett Merrick suddenly gets psychic. He's 100%. He's 100% on all the stuff he's able to do. So Bankston is following him, and he tells the story of his sister. William Bankston's sister is opening a can with a knife, and she slices her finger wide open. And Merrick is sitting there, and he says, "Give me your hand." And he puts his hand over her finger like this. And she says, Quit squeezing my finger. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And she said it was tremendous heat and it hurt. And he said, "I'm not even touching." And they looked, and his hand wasn't even touching. And he said within 20 minutes, there was, later, the wound had healed, no cut, no scar, no scab. And all he did it was by touch, by an energy field, by touch. So you'll see on the ship, the question is, how do they put in implants without leaving any scars? This is a possible explanation of how they do it. You'll see them put a hand on somebody's head, and the pain goes away. There's a story told yesterday. Put the hand in the back of the head, and suddenly it all gets better. It's almost like this, they have this energy healing. The aliens are using this same sort of method, which I'll talk about later, this Bankston method. When I'm with Chris Bledsoe, and I don't know if you know the Chris Bledsoe case, I won't explain it. Hollywood is going to pick it up. It's a dramatic abduction experience. When I'm with him at his place in North Carolina, this incident happens where, and this will be in the movie, I think, where we're walking in the house and the dog comes on my left side. The aliens keep letting the dogs out of the house. That's what I think happened. They kept letting, and we're going to Florida, and whatever. You left the door open, Chris. I mean, who cares, you know? And I go to Florida, and I come back, and I'm not really impressed with these dogs kept coming in the house. The front door kept going wide open, and the dogs would come in. So when we come back, as we're going in the house, Nellie, who's the black lab, comes on my left side, and you can see the blood all over my pants. Suddenly, the blood shooting out the dog's neck, and Chris is going, what the heck? And it's up the walls, and there's blood all over the place and stuff like that. And we put the dog down, and he's holding it, and I'm taking pictures, and I'm photographing all this. Now it's like, this is real. I mean, the dogs, that was garbage, letting the dogs in. This is real stuff, man. I'm photographing what's going on here. And after about 2-3 minutes, he lifts up the rag. The rag is completely filled with blood. We thought the dog was going to die. I mean, we wouldn't get it to the vet. It was bleeding that bad. And the dog gets up and walks away. And 2 days later, it's almost like the thing with the Bankston healing thing is that 2 days later, they looked. Here's the dog with the blood. They went to look. They could not find a wound on the dog's neck. And yet it was like it hit an artery. It was just like the blood was just shooting all over the place. So it's almost the same sort of thing, that you can close a wound and leave nothing. This is something, yesterday we had the first one. Sid told me about one on the right, but until Sid told me one, it appeared that all alien implants are on the left side of the body. And that would be significant. If it's true, it may not be true, but that's what Roger Lear said. All the implant things he had taken out. That's significant because the left side of the body is run by the right brain. The right brain is the unconscious, non-local brain. It's not the conscious brain. And that's where this right brain, left brain thing may be actually important. That if the aliens are dealing with people, they're dealing with the subconscious mind. The same as, and I had one yesterday, a person talked to me about hearing a voice in his ear. And I said, which ear? Left ear. Right brain. A lot of psychics hear in their left ear. So they're talking to the right brain. They're talking to the unconscious mind. Again, this is this thing. Here's synchronicity. I'll skip synchronicity. It's the same sort of thing. This is remote viewing. If you see remote viewing with the right brain, left brain thing, this is how remote viewing works. They already knew that this is right brain, left brain, back in the 1970s when the CIA was doing experiments. And the way it works is, if you have a target, they will just give you a number. They will not give you any hint of what the target is. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to stop the analytical overlay. They're trying to stop the left brain from getting involved. Because if you give a target and you say the target is 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, tell me what it is. What you're doing is you're forcing the right brain, the non-local one connected to the internet, to the conscious internet, to do the psychic stuff. Figure out what it is. And all they say is, tell me what you feel, tell me what you see, tell me what you smell, and don't guess what it is. Because if you try to guess what it is, that's the chatter. That's the left brain analytical mind. Because if you allow it in, if you say this is a target from Egypt, the left brain, the little storyteller, is going to say, I know what it is. It's the king's chamber. It's the king's chamber. And it's over. I mean, once the left brain gets involved and starts guessing what it is, it's over. So this is an experiment that was done by Russell Targ. And what they did is they actually made a pile of money on the stock market. They were raising money and they were running this thing. And the left brain is the rational analytical brain. And it's numbers, it's words, it's all this kind of stuff. And they realized that psychics cannot see, if you're going to read the stock market, or if you're going to read numbers on a Powerball ticket or something like that, the psychic mind can't do it. Because the psychic mind sees images. It doesn't see words and numbers. So when they started to make money, and they were doing this to raise money and to prove this, they were playing the silver market. They were playing the silver futures market in 1982. Russell Targ, who helped run the CIA remote viewing thing that got it all going. So what they did is they realized that the left brain can't see up, down, even, silver's going up and down, whatever. So what they do is they do what's called associated remote viewing. They take each of the targets, whether it's up, even, down, and they associate with an image. So they'd say, one is a pancake, one's a balloon, one's this. And so they just tell the remote viewer, they say, on Friday, we're going to show you an object. We want you to give me the target. What is the object we're going to show you? And then the guy will say, okay, it's kind of flat and it's floppy. And then they go, oh, they think that's a pancake. That means it's going up. And they actually played, and they made $250,000 in the stock market, playing the silver futures market. They were on every single time. And then they started to actually, they did a second experiment which didn't work, and what they found out was that they weren't giving, the guy wanted to make more money. The guy was financing, they were making so much money on this thing that they wanted to finance it. And so he said, well, give him 2 targets a week. But then the guy didn't get any feedback from the first target, and they were already giving him the second target, and then it all fell apart. The third time they ran it, they only did the one, and they made sure the guy got the feedback of what his first experiment was, and they were like basically 100% accurate on remote viewing by using this associated remote viewing. But it's important because they're using objects rather than numbers, because numbers are left brain. And they understood this, that you're trying to shut down the left brain and make the right brain do the psychic stuff, make it do the remote viewing stuff. So there's the target. No. Out of body. The whole thing about when you're out of your body, once you think about, oh, I'm out of my body, your conscious mind drags you back in. It's like you allow the conscious mind to get back in the picture, and it sort of drags you back in. This is a guy who was doing stuff on religious experience, and he was looking at, he was doing the EEG stuff on people who had religious experiences and meditation, nirvana experiences like that, and basically came to the conclusion that basically it's this oneness thing, that basically they all hit this same sort of frequency, and that they're all tapped in the same thing, that there is no difference between the different religions, that once you get into this meditative thing where you get these religious experiences that start all these religions, that they're basically all doing the same thing. And this guy actually talked about oneness. There is no Muslim, there is no Jewish, there is just one. This idea of oneness, the right side, that it's all connected, it's all one. UFO healings. There's been lots of UFO healings, which is another thing, that if the aliens are doing this kind of stuff, we can learn what they're doing. We can look at this kind of stuff, and we already know, like this thing about energy healing, stuff like that. We started to realize, and you can learn from this. You can actually apply it to your daily life and learn stuff and invent new stuff. This is a thing I've shown around. This guy's in my city, he's in Winnipeg. This is a guy who is seeing orbs in his bedroom. He has had no real dramatic UFO experiences. He hadn't had any alien experience. He had a lot of weird stuff going on. And most of it, he's known as the Orb Man. And he sees these orbs in his bedroom. And this is important because it's a blue light. So I meet him, I hear he's doing photographs, he's photographing fleets over Winnipeg and stuff like that. And I go, whoa, it's this guy. We go and meet the guy, and I talk to him, and he seems, rational, but he's just kind of obsessed with orbs and stuff like that. And he shows me this picture of the blue light, which is important, because this is the guy, when you come to these healing things, this is a guy who phones me up in February of this year, and he says, Grant, he says, I think I got cancer. And I said, what? Are you kidding? And he's like in his 40s, he's a young guy. And he said, yeah, I think I'm going for a test. I'm going for a biopsy. And you know how it works. And I mean, it's a triage thing. So he's in cancer care in Manitoba. He's like, right away. They send him in right away. And he's got this big, huge tumor on the back of his neck, and it's growing every day. And he says it's coming around the left side, and it's going up into his ear. And so they take him for the biopsy, and it's inconclusive, the biopsy. And then they're going to send him for a second biopsy. So the second biopsy is on the Tuesday. This happens Sunday morning at 1 o'clock in the morning. And this is kind of bizarre. I always show this. Is this the video here? And it comes down between the white wall there, between the two closets. And it comes up. And now you're going to see it in slow motion. And the blue light was important because that's where it comes. You can't really see it on this thing, but if you see it on a big screen, it actually comes down the wall, and it comes into his dirty clothes. He's very upset that he left his dirty clothes on the floor. And he's filming. This is 1 o'clock Sunday morning, and you'll see this object appear, and it's moving. It's getting bigger. It's coming towards him. And then it'll move up and down into him. Boom. And so this is 1 o'clock in the morning. He's just swearing. We actually take the audio off. He was just freaking out when this happened. And he doesn't go to sleep till 11 o'clock Sunday morning. And then he says he gets up 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and he goes to the bathroom and he's feeling his neck and he goes, what the heck's going on? And he goes and everything's gone. Tumor's gone. He said, unless you were to actually feel, you would not be able to feel anything on his neck. It's completely gone. So he goes to the oncologist on the Tuesday, and the oncologist said, what happened? And he said, oh, I think it went away. He said, what do you mean it went away? It doesn't go away. He said, yeah, I think it happened Sunday morning. I think it went away Sunday morning. The guy goes, that's incredible. He said, I've never seen it like that before. But his normal doctor, I think have we got the thing here? Well, here's all these orbs. He's got these things flying all over the place. Here comes one right at him. Yeah. So I'm just trying to find the picture. I know there's the one that happened a couple days ago, a close-up. We framed it. But what happens is he has this cut in his head, and this is what I believe aliens are doing, is they're leading you with breadcrumbs. They're not really telling you anything. They just want you to figure it out for yourself. So what happens is he has this cut in the top of his forehead, and it's like a Y cut in the top of his head. And as I said, he has no alien experience. He doesn't remember aliens or anything like that. He just wakes up, and he has this cut in the top of his head, and he says to me, he said, why would they do this to me? Because he woke up in the middle of the night, his hands are all wet, and he goes to the bathroom, and he's got blood all over his hands. And he goes, what the heck's going on? And he's looking, and he goes back and looks at the bed, and there's no blood on the sheets, even though his hair is all full of blood, and on the pillow. And then he goes back and he washes it out, and he takes a picture, which I should have put on the video. He has this picture on top of his head with this Y cut in the crown of his head, a real deep cut. It was so deep he should have gone for stitches. And he's going like, what the heck's going on here? And he said, why would they do this? I said, oh, I think they're just giving you a signal. And he said, what do you mean a signal? And he's all upset. What do you mean a signal? And I said, oh, I don't know, maybe they're trying to get a hold of you, they're trying to talk to you, and you're not listening. So they said, well, let's do something that he can't deny. He can't say he cut on the bedpost. He can't, cut himself shaving or bumped it on the bedpost. It's something that's going to say, think about this, something's going on. And now he's like sort of the head guy for orbs. He's got these really bizarre experiences happening, and we're sort of showing his stuff. Which leads me to cancer. I seem to be getting all this cancer stuff. This is the Bankston thing, which when I heard an interview that Bankston and one of the healers from Chicago had done on a show called Skeptical, which is run by Alex Takaris. And Alex is a friend of mine, and I was on his show, and he does consciousness. He does just basic consciousness. He has UFO people on there. He has atheists on there. He has people working on near-death studies, and he has 300 interviews and all these different interviews. He has Bankston on there. And when I see Bankston, and he has the healer on, and he has a heart palpitation problem. And so he brings the healer on, and he says, okay, I'm just going to tell you. He said, we're going to do this interview, and I'm going to take your little program, and I'm going to take the 4 weeks, and we're going to do it, and everybody's going to know. If it works, it works. Everybody's going to know. If it doesn't work, everybody's going to know. So she said, okay, fine. So he goes, and he broadcasts the show 8 weeks later, and it's gone. He's, palpitations are gone, and he's gone through the whole thing, and when his specialist said, you're not going to do this, go to the hospital, and stuff like this. And so at the same time, I was diagnosed with a heart murmur, which was pretty bizarre, and I had 3 doctors as specialists and stuff like that. So I contacted Alex, and I said, Alex, does it really work? And he said, yeah, it worked. And I said, I was interested because I had the problem, because when I go to the States, you're not going to get insurance. You can't get insurance to go to the States. So I had nothing to lose. So I asked Alex, I said, did you do the rapid image cycling? And this is what it came down to. When I heard it was doing rapid image cycling, I said, I know what's going on. I know what they're doing. And I'll explain what rapid image cycling is in a sec. I said, did you do the rapid image cycling? He said, no. He said, I was just the mouse in the cage. And Bankston, the guy that had developed this, had done cancer studies in the 70s, 80s, and like 100%. Mice, 100%. And these were tumors, mammary tumors that they'd put in these mice that would live between 14 and 27 days. No one had lived past 27 days. No chemotherapy, radiation. They never cured a single rat. And his were all like completely cured. So when he said this, I phoned up the woman and I said, have you ever done a heart murmur? She said, yeah, they'd done a few. And I said, okay. So I tried it. Boom. I go back go for the echo thing, and it's clean. And I go, wow. It's like a UFO thing. Wow. I mean, like, this thing actually works. So I start working on this, and it's the same sort of thing. It's this energy thing. And this is the Cadillac of all energy healings. This is the one that claims 95% effective against Alzheimer's. This is the one that claims 100% against cancer, unless you've had chemotherapy or radiation. And the reason I believe that is because radiation and chemotherapy are left brain healings. They're survival of the fittest. It's me versus you, ego, separation, that sort of thing. If you've had chemotherapy or radiation, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work 100% on diabetes and Parkinson's and stuff like that. But on cancer, the more dramatic the cancer is, the better it works. So I started looking at this thing, and then what rapid image cycling is, and I even argued with the healer, and I said, no, this is, and she said, no, that's not what it is. And then I eventually found out Bankston agrees with me that is what it is. And what it was you get the healer out of the way. That you've got this healing energy, and what you got to do is you got to shut the left brain down. So here's how rapid image cycling works. You take 20 ego images, images that appeal to you. I need a new car, and you imagine the new car, what color it is, and a house, and I want this house, and it looks like this. And these, it has to be selfish images, left brain images that will appeal to the ego. You put all these images, and then what you do is you rapid image cycle. You practice, and it takes months. I'm still practicing, and I can do like 8 images a second or something like that. Bankston can do 200 a second. And what you're doing is you're flipping these images. And what you're doing, and I say, you're just taking the ego, and you're saying, go for coffee, watch this. And the ego goes, oh, cool, cool, cool. And Bankston says, you're getting the healer out of the way. The healer gets out of the way, and the energy is allowed to come in. Whereas if you're sitting there, heal, 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 you're using your conscious mind. You're using the left brain to try to heal somebody. When, if you can get the left brain out of the way, shut it down, the same as you do, whether it's through psychedelics, meditation, whatever, you get this paranormal phenomena. You're able to transfer this bizarre, non-local phenomena in. You're allowed to bring the energy in by getting the healer out of the way. So Bankston does this whole thing with the healing. And it fits into the model of this right brain, left brain, that there's this energy that, and everything is possible. I'm going to get to the stuff here at the end. Oh, this is another significant thing. That Bankston doesn't, it's almost like ufology. Bankston doesn't get much credit for what he does. Alex says to him, I bet you I know what happened. You won the Nobel Prize, everything's under control, whatever. And Bankston says, absolutely not. It's like ufology, like totally ignored. Nobody watches it, nobody does anything. And this guy's now the president of the Society for Scientific Exploration, which is the organization that has all the paranormal stuff. They will actually, scientists will actually look at paranormal phenomena. There's UFO people there. There's high-level scientists who are looking at this kind of stuff, where you can actually go in there and not be ostracized. He shows this, and this is very significant when it comes to the physical worldview. The physical worldview says you and I are separate. We're individuals. You're not connected to me in any way. The Bankston thing, and he shows this. They have EEGs, the brain scans of the people. And what they do is, here you'll see a scan where they've got 3 different healers, 3 different people being treated. And what happens is they determine that you go along, and then at one point, both the brains are in sync. And they hit a resonance of 7.81. Like that, and it goes for 3 seconds. And they believe that's when the healing takes place. And this is very significant in the physical worldview, because if my brain can phase lock with your brain, then they're connected. And science doesn't want to hear that. They want, it's like individual, it's just your consciousness, it's just light coming off a light bulb, mine's just light, nothing, there's no connection, we're separate individuals. It's the left brain model. But he's actually shown with actual evidence that the brains actually do sync lock. And then you start looking at other things that where other things will sync lock. And basically it comes down to that first experiment I showed with the DNA, that the frequency that they use with the DNA, with the test tubes, is the same frequency that these brains are locking in. And it's the Schumann resonance. It's the resonance of the electromagnetic field between the ionosphere and the Earth. It's 7.81. And what you see is that a lot of psychic phenomena, will link into this Schumann resonance. Hang on. This is the one with they realized that they did experiments at Planck University, the Institute in Berlin, and found that they could phase lock brains of 2 people playing guitar, that their brains would start to phase lock. And so you have this idea of this connected, this oneness thing, that our brains can actually link together and phase lock, which goes against their theory. This is Dr. Kit Green. He is rumored to be the guy who does he was from 73, whatever it was, 70 after Lundahl till 83 when Pandolfi took over. He ran the Weird Desk at the CIA. It's got all the UFO stuff, all the psychic phenomena stuff. He's the control officer for the CIA for the remote viewing experiments that took place at Stanford Research Institute in the 1970s, when all the remote viewing started. He was the officer. He's actually going to do an experiment, and I'm not sure whether this experiment is actually taking place, where he's going to do exactly the same experiment. He's going to put a person who's telepathic into an MRI, then he's going to put a target into an MRI, and then he's going to get the person to send a signal, to send a telepathic message, and the other person is going to pick it up, and they're going to see if the brains phase lock, whether they link into this sort of thing. So science is gradually coming into this thing where you're getting people who are taking the sort of the step. And the guy he was going to do it with was this guy, Gao, or however you pronounce his name. And he was the Chinese guy with the Chinese Academy of Sciences who was going to do the experiment with him. And he actually had an enlightenment experience. He has a theory on atomic structure, and he said he got it in the early morning of October the 12th, 1993. I suddenly had an enlightenment. At that moment, I felt my entire body permeated the whole universe, and I was united with it. So him and the CIA guy are going to do this experiment whether you can phase lock two brains with telepathic signals. Edgar Mitchell, of course, has his oneness experience. He has this experience where he realizes that all the world is one and that everything's alive. And he said he was dramatically affected by this, started the Noetic Institute because of it, and has spent his whole life doing this. This is the thing about the frequency. This Schumann resonance thing is very significant, where a lot of psychic phenomena, you will see this frequency show up. This is Ingo Swann. I think this was the one. They call it the gateway. Schumann resonance is the gateway to the unconscious. Ingo Swann, he was at in Sudbury at the Persinger's thing, wearing the God helmet, and he was doing experiments there. And Persinger actually still maintains this as a physical phenomena, but Persinger got him on the thing, and you'll see on the top of that slide there, Persinger shows Ingo Swann when he's doing a target, and he claims Ingo Swann's very, very, very accurate, and he shows the Schumann resonance, that Ingo Swann goes into the Schumann resonance when he hits the target. So this is very significant, this idea of electromagnetic fields. This Persinger. Persinger has this guy, and he studied this guy quite a bit, and he claims the same thing, that when this guy is reading somebody's mind, the longer he's with the person, the more their brains phase lock. That he's actually just, and what Persinger's idea is that all this stuff is in the electromagnetic field, the Schumann resonance, and that our brains are able to tap into this stuff, but it's still just a physical thing. We just tap into this thing, we pull this stuff not out of the universe of consciousness, but out of the Schumann resonance that goes around the world. The part of the story he leaves out is that any remote viewer that's any good will tell you it's just as easy to remote view the future as it is the past. So you have this problem of time and space, that it probably is not a physical phenomenon, it's something other than just tapping into an electromagnetic field that's around the Earth. But Persinger is actually in some degree of trouble. I mean, he's had some static. People are sort of writing him off as a crazy guy, and he still maintains, it's just a physical phenomenon and stuff like that. But he's getting to the edge. He's sort of walking on that fine line to where we're talking and where the scientists are talking. This gets into this download thing where we've started to learn how to do this kind of stuff. And the example I show is the one with Edison, who had 2,300 patents. And what Thomas Edison would do, he would use the idea of the hypnagogic state. When you're awake, and then just before you go to sleep, you go through this hypnagogic state. And what he was doing is he was employing this to get into this, break the filter, get into the unconscious, sort of the unconscious mind, or whatever you want to call it, the matrix, or whatever you want to call it. And what he would do is he always claimed he never slept at night. He would sleep an hour or two, but he wouldn't sleep. He'd go into his lab, and he'd sit in a chair, and he'd take two steel balls, and he'd put them he'd put his arms on the chair with these two steel balls, and he would just sit there, and then he would meditate. He would just sit there, and of course he would go to sleep. He would just sort of go to sleep, and as soon as he would go to sleep, his hand would relax, the two steel balls would fall out of his hand, and he had a steel bowl on the floor. And the balls would hit this thing, and it would wake him up, and he'd quickly write down what was in his mind. because he was going through this state. And he had 3,000 notebooks full of all this stuff that he'd written down in his mind. And he was using this, and apparently a number of other artists and people were using the same process. One was using a key, where they would sit there, and as soon as they go to sleep, they'd drop the key, and then they would wake up, and they would get art creations through this it's the same ideas. Break the filter, get over to the other side, find out the password. And this is, so we start to understand that you can actually do this. If you know the techniques, you can actually start to do this kind of stuff. This is Fadiman. This is the guy that ended up, Edgar Mitchell ran the Noetics Institute, and Fadiman became the director at one point. And Fadiman talks about psychedelics, and people sometimes get a little upset about psychedelics. Psychedelics, we know, kills the ego. When you have high psychedelics with psilocybin, LSD, and in 1966 they were still doing experiments in universities with psychedelics, and one was going on at Menlo Park. And it comes down to this idea about in California, all this stuff was going on. All the money for computers was on the East Coast at MIT, and all the stuff was, the Silicon Valley, all the computer stuff was invented on the West Coast, where they had the psychedelics. And they were doing psychedelics experiments. This is 1966. This is the day they shut the psychedelic experiments down. Fadiman tells the story. What they've got is they've got 48 scientists, engineers, and architects. In order to get into the study, the only one requirement you have is you have a problem that you've worked on for 3 months, and you cannot solve the problem. You've worked on it, you cannot solve nothing. You get into the program. What they do is they gave these 48 scientists, engineers, and architects 100 micrograms of LSD. They put the eye patches on, play Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, whatever, lay them in a room, and Fadiman said, within minutes, 44 of 48 had got the solution to their problem. And what it was, psychedelics shuts that, it kills the ego. It just shuts that left brain down, and it sort of throws you. It's like the fast way. It just throws you in there. This is the savants, which I think are very important. They don't get much attention. This is the guy that did pi to 22,514 places. He's what's known as synesthesiac. He sees numbers as colors, as tastes, as smells, and this sort of stuff. And he describes his different numbers. He sees numbers as different shapes, different colors, and stuff like that. And when he did the pi to 22,000 places, he wasn't calculating in his head. He was just simply reading this chart. He sees numbers and colors, and he's just reading the color and the number. And as he goes along, he's reciting this. And he's very important because most savants, very good savants, can't speak. The left brain is sort of shut down. They're very, socially inept and stuff like that. This guy is sort of normal, and he can describe what's going on in his head. And this is the important thing. When he gets numbers, most of these savants who have this left brain damage can do these unbelievable calculations. They can remember songs. They can do all this kind of stuff. He describes what happens in his mind when they give him two numbers. So they give him 53, multiply it by 131. What he sees is 53. He sees that image in his head. That's what 53 looks like to him. So he sees 53, and he sees 131 on the other side. And what he says, and this is important, scientists won't tell you this, what he says, what he does, he doesn't do any calculating. He just sits and waits for the image to appear between the two images. And the image will appear. And it will fill in the space between. It will be the same shape. It'll fill in the two spaces in between, and he knows what that number is. So he says 6943, and that's the answer. But he didn't calculate it. He just waited for that number to come up, pop in his head. So it's a download. He's not calculating anything. The same as these savant kids who are able to do calendar calculations. I'm going to show you a video of these calendar calculations. These kids who are rocking back and forth and totally out to lunch, doing these calculations. They're not calculating anything. They're downloading this stuff. It's coming. They're pulling it out of somewhere. Here's the colors. He sees, this is the same thing. He's seeing the colors with it. So he's reading the numbers. We've already know that you can actually shut, this happens at University of, it's in Australia, where they actually can shut the left brain down. They magnetically stimulate the left side of the brain, the conscious analytical side, and what they say is draw a cat. So the person's drawing the cat, ooh, and it's a lousy looking cat, whatever, and then they're stimulating the brain. All of a sudden the cat's getting better. Try it again, and draw it, and next thing you know, they're drawing like an artist, and they can draw a cat, and they've never drawn a cat before, and then they turn off the stimulation, and you can't draw a cat anymore. So they can show that when you shut down that left brain, you can actually produce savant-type abilities in people. This is the video I'm talking about. People, when I say that they're using this thing about genetic memory, the genetic memory man. This is how they explain this. Oh, it's just genetic memory. The guy has has a mathematical gene that he's able to do this kind of stuff. These are two guys. These are I think they're the Sachs twins. I think they call them the Sachs twins. This is 1960. This is John and Michael, and they're very autistic, and they're going to do calorie calculations. And I want you to see at the end, first you're going to see them doing these calculations of what day of the week a certain day is going to be, and you're going to think, oh, they're calculating this stuff. And scientists will say they're calculating, and then you tell me at the end, when they start asking them rational analytical stuff, like basic mathematical stuff that's on the left side of the brain, they start asking, you tell me, is this kid got a mathematical gene? Watch this. Oh, well, let me explain this first. This is the Rain Man thing. The other thing these people can do, which is absolutely defies anything science can explain, is this thing that was done in Rain Man. You see this experiment where he's in the restaurant and he's autistic. He needs toothpicks in his pancakes all the time. And I need toothpicks. And he's saying, get him some toothpicks. And she gets a toothpick. She drops the toothpick box, and he immediately goes 246. He sees on the floor and he counts 246 toothpicks. And these people can do this kind of stuff. So here's the thing from Rain Man.
Let me check.
This is based on a true story.
82, 82, 82. 82 what, Ray? How much is this? Toothpicks. It's a lot more than 82 toothpicks, Ray. Plus 246 total. Change. Ray, how many toothpicks are there?
250.
Pretty close. Come on, let's go, Ray. 246.
There's 4.
There's 4 in the box. So they actually had a guy that could take peas in a bowl. They could take the peas and drop them on the floor, and as they hit the floor, you could tell exactly how many peas are on the floor. And they can do this kind of stuff. So the question is, where are they getting it? Are they calculating this? Are they using the right brain to link into this unconscious field? So here's these two savants. This is a dramatic short clip from these two savants calculating.
It's July 19th, in the year 92,000.
July 19th, 92,000?
860. There it is.
92,860?
Yes.
That will be 92,860, July 19th.
Right, July 19th.
That will be on July 18th, 92,840.
Yeah,
That will be on a Monday.
on Monday, all right. Now, July 19th in the year 132,470. Figure this one out.
July 19th, that will be on a Saturday.
Saturday, all right. Now, I want to ask some other questions.
Yeah.
How many days in a year?
365.
365. Is it more than 365 or exactly 365?
And a leap year is 366.
366.
Leap year.
All right. How many days in a week?
307.
How many months in a year?
12.
How many hours in a day?
24.
How many minutes in an hour?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. How many seconds in a minute?
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Sure it's not more than 10?
I'm sure.
Sure. All right. How much is 4 times 7?
4 times 7, I don't know.
You don't know?
No, we'll do 4.
Come on, McBride taught you for months.
Remember?
You remember when McBride taught you?
Yeah.
What day was that he taught you on?
That's in 1964. 64.
What month?
In February.
What ward?
Ward 5.
Right. Now, 4 times 7 is how much?
Is it 21?
21. Couldn't be more?
Could be more.
You're not calculating at all. This is a guy, dramatic. Guy has been totally ignored. I mean, I'm trying to get some TV people to deal with this guy. I mean, this guy, unbelievable. This guy is the guy that can do 4 symphonies in his head at the same time. He told Penn State University he could do 2, and she said, can you do 3? And he said, well, if I pushed it, I think I could do 4. They put him in an MRI machine, and basically they give him 4 symphonies to listen to, and they got an orchestra leader on the other side as a control, and the orchestra leader is like wiped out right from the beginning. He can't do anything. And so they put him in the symphony, and he's got these 4 symphonies. He says, okay, start Bach's symphony. And he's, okay. And then they say, okay, 20 seconds later, say, okay, start Handel's symphony. And what he says he sees in his mind is he sees a symphony orchestra on a stage. And then when he says start the second one, then the second orchestra starts on the stage, and it starts playing the second symphony. And then the third one is in behind the symphony. And then she says the fourth one, like a couple minutes later, start the 4th symphony. And then that one's underneath the floor. And he's got these 4 symphonies going at the same time. And he says he can actually go into any one symphony, and he can listen to the tuba play, and he can listen to the violin, and he can move around in the symphonies, and he's got these 4 symphonies going in his head at the same time. And so they've got, in the control room, they've got the symphony started at exactly the same time. And then at one point he's in the MRI machine, and they just hear this thing, and she says, okay, stop all the symphonies. And she says, okay, where are you in symphony number 1? And he goes, da, 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 and he's exactly where the symphony is. Okay, number 2, and he plays that. He's dead on to the note for every single symphony. He's got 4 symphonies going in his head at the same time. He says every day he listens to 2 symphonies at the same time in his head. He just listens to symphonies. And you get this kind of stuff, there's no way you can explain it with the model that science is giving for consciousness. You got to go to a model, that UFO type stuff, where it's really weird and very complex. This is Diana Powell, and then I'm going to go to quickly zip through downloads. Diana Powell, as I said, worked with John Mack. She's related to UFO. She knows about UFO type stuff. She wrote a book called The ESP Enigma. She works with a child here. Let me set it up here. This is a girl by the name of Haley. She has a number of these students, people that she's working with. Haley was one of her therapists. Got the idea that Haley could read her mind, so she said to Haley, Haley, how do you say I love you in German? And Haley goes, she can't talk. She's nonverbal. Her brain is completely shut down on the left side. She just punches this in, and exactly the German words. She put them down. So they go to Diana Powell, and this girl at one point hit 162 numbers in a row right. You're going to see her do 18. They wanted to play games. She got tired with the telepathy thing and just kept telling me what the numbers were. So they played a little game, and they said, okay, Haley, we're going to play a little game. You do the mathematics. You take this times this, and it's going to be equal to this. You have to get the first and the second and the third, the thing. So you're going to see her do a calculation. On the right side, you're going to see the left side, you're going to see the number with the calculation, and you're going to see her punching this thing into the board as she's doing this thing.
The video you're looking at shows the experimental setup we had last spring. Haley, a 10-year-old severely autistic child, and her therapist are seated alone in the room, together at a table and separated by a tall partition that prevents eye-to-eye or physical contact. Cards with randomized numbers, words, sentences, pictures, and equations were hidden until the experiment. The therapist viewed them one by one on her side of the visual barrier and then asked Haley what she was thinking or looking at. Haley pointed with her wooden pencil inside characters on stencils with her right hand to select them, and then entered them with her left into a device that converts text to speech. You'll notice that there are no characters for division signs, equal signs, or decimal points, so the therapist had to tell Haley when these occurred. You'll also notice that her answer is 100% accurate on 18 out of 18 digits.
And hers was totally ignored. She's like us, totally ignored her. Deepak Chopra has now offered to fund a study, because the skeptics, of course, said, well, there was probably just a tape recorder in the room. The little girl was listening to a tape recorder. Now she has to do all the experiments all over again. So she's in the same position we are. Here's Jeopardy. This is the downloads, and this is kind of, I'm going to go very fast because we've only got a few minutes left. We're going to play Jeopardy. And we're going to go through the categories here. The categories are going to be computers, inventions, Nobel Prizes, books, and music.
Here we go into the Jeopardy round.
Okay.
And
first one, computers for 100. Steve Jobs at Apple Computers attributed his creative ability and innovations to this. LSD. Steve Jobs believed that the experimenting with LSD was one of the 2 or 3 most important things he had ever done in his life. He also stated it reinforced my sense of what was important, creating great things, making money. So the left side of his brain, he talked about this thing that this is where his creativity, this is where ideas came from. Fadiman, let's do computers. Doug Engelbart, who was credited with the creation of the computer, attributed his discovery in 1950 to what? And of course the answer is he had an inspirational download. This is where the idea for the computer came from. In a single stroke, Engelbart experienced a complete vision of the information age. He saw himself sitting in front of a large computer screen full of different symbols. He would create a word situation for organizing all the information and communications needed for a given product. In his mind, he saw streams of characters moving on the display. Although nothing of the sort existed, it seemed that the engineering would be easy to do. He gets his download December of 1950. He first produces it at Berkeley in 1968. It takes him 18 years to build it. In 1950, he saw the whole thing. He's the guy that invented the mouse. The whole thing was credited to him, and he got it in a download. 1905, Einstein used this to develop the theory of relativity. The answer is a dream. Einstein actually said he had this dream of going on a toboggan down the slope and seeing things changing and stuff like that. That's where he got the idea for relativity. And he actually said at one point, my entire career was based on a dream. The Engelbart, 1960, the software engineers that were using what to create inventions? And of course, it's LSD. Hewlett-Packard actually had invention parties where they had their engineers and they were giving them LSD and they were trying to create things with LSD. They were trying to shut down the left brain and allow the right brain to put things together. Nobel Prizes for 200. Mother Teresa had 4 of these leading to her Nobel Prize. Visions. She had 4 visions. That's what caused her to start the thing. She had 4 visions, and she actually at one point basically told Jesus, go look for somebody else who's worthier and more generous. She told him to get lost in vision number 3. And this is only released after she died in a letter that she had written to somebody. This is the Daily Double. Francis Crick, I told this before, he had the DNA structure where he got it from. And of course the idea is that he had got it through LSD, and Francis Crick did not believe, or he maintained on the surface that there was evolution, random evolution, but he came up with the theory of panspermia to explain how we got here where we are, because he knew well enough that you can't explain our creation by random mutations. So he came up with the panspermia theory, and Carl Sagan also wrote about the panspermia theory as that's how we got here. So they just, it's like the panspermia theory man. It's like you just sort of say, oh, it came from somebody else. And that's how we explain this thing. Books for 100. This is a good one. The 7 books of Harry Potter series share this one characteristic. They all came in a download to J.K. Rowling's on a train going into London. Here's her telling the story to Oprah.
And then I was on a train, I was 25, and it came, and what came was, boy doesn't know he's a wizard, goes to wizarding school. Bang, bang, bang. And then that was it, and that was like touch paper, and I was on this delayed train going from Manchester to London, and my head was just flooding with what's at this wizard school. There are 4 houses, there are ghosts, there are house ghosts. What do they teach? What subjects do they learn? Who are the teachers? And I had no pen. But that was it. That was it. I don't think I had ever felt so excited. I thought I'd love to write that. I'd never thought about writing for children.
Computers for 200. This is a good one. Larry Page at Google attributes the creation of the company, the creation of Google, to this. A dream. Here's him talking about where Google came from.
I have a story about following dreams. Or maybe, more accurately, it's a story about finding a path to make those dreams real. You know what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night with a vivid dream? And you know how if you don't have a pencil and pad by the bed, it will be completely gone by the next morning. I had one of those dreams when I was 23. When I suddenly woke up, I was thinking, what if we could download the whole web and just keep the links? And I grabbed a pen and started writing. Sometimes it's important to wake up and stop dreaming. I spent the middle of that night scribbling out the details and convincing myself it would work. Soon after, I told my advisor, Terry Winograd, it would take a couple of weeks for me to download the web. He nodded knowingly, fully aware it would take much longer, but wise enough not to tell me.
Music for 200. The lead singers of the following bands: Kiss, Moody Blues, U2, Grateful Dead, and the Hell on Wheels band all share the following thing. The lead singers all believe they've been abducted by aliens. I'll talk about that tomorrow. Nobel Prize 400. Nobel Prizes for the laser and the hologram share the following thing. They both came in downloads while sitting on a park bench. This is the one for the laser. It's actually a statue now. They've actually got the park bench and they've turned it into a statue. Inventions for 400. Edison used this. I talked about this already. He used the hypnagogic state where he'd have the steel balls. Music for 300. The Battle Hymn of the Republic and Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, and also O Little Town of Bethlehem, all share this. They were all done with automatic writing. Because when I mention Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, they always mention the devils, and I say, oh, you got to remember, Little Town of Bethlehem happened the same way. Devil was writing A Little Town of Bethlehem. They talk about how Stairway to Heaven was written. The original Xerox machine was invented using this, spirits. The guy firmly believed he'd gotten the information from spirits for the Xerox machine. And he's the guy that funded all the reincarnation research at the University of Virginia. Books for 200. Atwater received her first 3 books. She was the expert on near-death experiences. She's written 12. The first 3, I'll sort of skip over this. She got them from a voice she heard in her 1997 near-death experiences. It basically told her what the names of the books were, what to put in the books, and she knew exactly what the books were going to be before she ever started writing them. That's her talking about it. Books for 300. The prestigious Brathwaite anthology listed 5 of her poems among the nation's best in 1917, and the New York Times hailed her first novel as a feat of literary composition. And that was Pearl Curran's writings, received from a 17th century spirit by the name of Patience Worth. Nobel Prizes for 500. This is a good one. Carrie Mullis, the 1993 Nobel Prize winner for chemistry, made the following 2 bizarre claims. What are the 2 claims are that he and his daughter had been abducted, and the other one was that LSD had helped him learn to walk around inside a molecule, and that's how he ended up with his Nobel Prize. Music for 500. These classical musicians from history have also claimed downloads and inspirations, because a lot of you'll see tomorrow, I'll talk about the musicians, a lot of the big rock guys are claiming downloads and abductions and stuff. And so when people brought up the idea that this is the devil doing it, I went back, because my mother's a church organist, and I went back and looked at all the old-time Bach, Beethoven, Handel, all this sort of stuff, and I tried to see, and basically these are all the ones that were claiming downloads. I mean, basically everybody. They're all saying, I was just a scribe and it was coming into my head and stuff like this. Books for 400. Twice nominated for a Nobel Prize, Francisco Xavier used this to write 412 books. He had a spiritually inspired automatic writing. The proceeds of 50 million books he sold went to charity. Got them all from, he believed, spirit from automatic writing. Computers for 400. Software that runs millions of routers worldwide, and all computer programming code used for virtual reality were inspired by what? Same thing, LSD. Basically, you wouldn't have computers with LSD. I mean, they're all doing it. I mean, there's just everything. So they talk about this thing, and the virtual reality software, they said everybody was doing it, the people that built the code for it. Books for 500. Brad Stagger, who wrote 180 books, had inspiration for where his inspiration came from, and he said it was a hooded figure that stood beside his bed, and that he and his wife called Elijah. Okay, so you have that's basically the same story as the engineer told me. This NASA engineer, this hooded figure, you couldn't see the face, you just could see the hooded figure standing there at the end of the bed, and suddenly the morning they get this great inspiration. Final Jeopardy. Here we go. Near-death experiences and OBs. This is very critical to the whole understanding of consciousness that the physical scientific world cannot explain. This has to do with near-death experiences and OBEs. In a 2-year study of blind people and near-death experiences, participants reported this. And the answer is sight. 80% of 31 participants claimed to be able to see clearly. These are people that were blind, including 9 of 14 who had been blind from death. So they couldn't even tell the difference between light and dark. They had no idea what sight even was. And these people claimed that they could see during a near-death experience, which really defies the whole conscious view that we're taught by the physical world, that it's just neurons moving and that you need all these inputs and stuff like that. When you have people who are out of their body and are blind and actually can see what's going on, you have a different something different that has to be explained. And this is the final conclusion from this study. Far-reaching and possible baleful consequences for the conventional materialistic view of science. By the same reasoning, empirical support for sight in the blind would be consistent with the various new paradigm, that's us guys, the new paradigm visions of science that are rooted in non-local, non-dual, holonomic perspectives in which consciousness is the primary reality. Furthermore, such studies would raise profound questions from any scientific perspective about body-mind relationships, the role of the brain in vision, and indeed the very mechanisms of sight. And that's it. Thank you.